From the heart of Dubai, where tomorrow is being built today, to the world. Welcome to the CTO Show with Mehmet. Here, we redefine technology and reimagine possibilities. With Mehmet, delve into the riveting realms of AI, cybersecurity, and digital technology. Experience the thrilling highs and lows of startups. Immerse yourself in the spirit of entrepreneurship and witness the future of business innovation being written in real time. Now, without further ado, let's tune in and explore the future.
Hello and welcome back to a new episode of the CTO Show with Mehmet. Today, I'm very pleased to have with me Ian joining me from the UK, from London. Ian, thank you very much for being on the show today. The way, as I was explaining to you, what I like to do, I keep it to my guests to introduce themselves and what they are up to. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mehmet. It's great to be here. Lovely to meet you. So I'm Ian. I'm the Chief Technology Officer and Head of Data Science for Adludio. We're a global business that's really focused on the use of AI to build and optimize mobile ads, particularly mobile, but for any format. My background is computer science, 25 years in the ad tech industry, 10 years at WPP, 10 years running the data science practice for publicists globally. I also had a spell consulting side with Towers Watson, but again, all in the area of technology. And most recently, for the last 5 to 7 years, technology is really focused on building and delivering applications that use various forms of artificial intelligence.
Great.
I'm a family man. I have four grown-up children. So my wife and I, our life there's a greater degree of freedom than ever now, which is nice. So that's me.
Great. Thank you very much for the introduction, Ian. And I'm again very pleased to have you today. So actually, I covered a lot of topics, related to tech on the show. I never had, someone from your, I would say, line of business, which is the ad tech. So the first thing, on a high level, if you can explain me, and of course, like we can go hours, I know on this, but at least on a high level, what is ad tech is all about, right? So for someone who might be interested, and exactly what you at Adludio you do, if you can explain me this.
Yes, of course. I mean, the ad tech industry is huge and involves essentially any technology that revolves around the communication with a consumer or a business. That's ad tech. So in many respects, a lot of the revenue that the likes of Google and Facebook are generating, you could say is essentially ad tech. They're using their data and their technology platform to provide services to brands primarily, to drive or to develop relationships with their consumers, to understand their needs and to communicate with them in ways that are meaningful and not intrusive. So that's the ad tech industry in a nutshell. There are thousands of ad tech vendors. There are many different specialists, everything from content to search to campaign management to the kind of work that we do. And we're very focused on the creative process. So very much known for very high quality, very high speed mobile creative. Adludio has been operating for nearly 9 years. So we have a lot of historic data about how to engage a consumer. And more recently, our technology platform has evolved significantly to include many different forms of AI to understand what really makes up a high quality mobile ad. And that includes things like gamification. So a lot of our ads are highly gamified in nature. And we also use machine learning and computer vision techniques to understand what's the best combination of game sequences and creative objects to engage a particular audience for a given brand, whether it's financial services or luxury or automotive. What's the best way to really engage an audience, and can we optimize the structure and the creative objects within that ad in real time.
Great. Thank you very much for this explanation, Ian. Now, you mentioned a couple of things that I want to like little bit dig more into that. So AI, when we say AI, people, it's the buzzword now. Everyone talks about it. But
Yeah.
if, like, especially, because AI depends a lot, it's machine learning at the end of the day, and you need to be collecting a lot of data. So now, first, I want to understand, like you mentioned about gamification and all this, and the creative side of it. But what can you describe like more the role of the AI in the whole, I would say, advertising ecosystem in
Yeah.
general?
Yeah. I mean, if you use our platform as an example, we're applying AI to every part of the campaign cycle. So it starts with so it fits our managed service offering, which is our delivery of mobile creative to agencies for their clients. That's our managed service offering. But we also deliver solutions to resellers and direct to brands. But the process for managed service begins with the briefing process. So what is the client trying to do? What audience are they trying to reach? What's the product offering? And we use natural language. We use large language models. So, I mean, that's the technique that's been used that underpins ChatGPT, for example. But we're
Mhm.
customizing those kinds of very large models to understand the briefing process. So the more an agency tells us about what their client is trying to achieve, the more our platform understands about how it needs to optimize a mobile ad. The next part of the process is bidding for digital publisher and inventory in real time. That's how digital media works. There's
Mhm.
an online auction process, and we use algorithms to optimize the bid. The next stage is using techniques like computer vision and neural nets to understand what's the best combination of creative objects. Do we use human beings? Do we not use human beings? What kind of color do we use in the foreground and background? What kind of text do we use? Where does the call to action button need to be? What kind of call to action button? And what's the combination of those creative objects and game sequences? What's the best way to engage, say, a financial services brand in France or a luxury goods consumer in the US? And our platform understands each of those factors and the
Mhm.
combinations of those, and then uses that data to optimize the next time it sees a campaign that appears to have the same kind of profile or the same kind of brief.
Mhm.
We've got a number of other machine learning techniques as well for things like pacing and forecasting. So, what are we trying to achieve, and have we achieved it, and where are the variances? And we also score publisher and inventory in the same way that we would score a mobile ad. So, what's the fit between the mobile creative and the publisher, and where it appears, and is there a good or bad fit between them creatively?
Mhm. So, like this is we talked about the what's under the hood. I would say now one thing when it comes to specifically anything that directly relates to the customer is and again you have AI, you have data, so
Mm.
the issues of transparency and ethics, right? So
Hmm.
how like do you address these issues in advertisement
Yeah, I
technology?
mean, obviously, yeah,
Yeah. So just I want to
yeah,
know, like, how do you handle this? And okay, because you are
yeah,
on the technical side, but at the same time, like we are all responsible for the these things as well as tech executives.
yeah. Obviously, and obviously, we're all consumers at the end of the day. So, privacy, GDPR, information security are very important topics now, and with such a focus on AI, there has to be a balance between the power that AI can bring and the privacy that the protection that we need to give to consumers and to businesses for that matter. Our particular solution is not cookie based and therefore doesn't use personal data. Our focus is very much on engaging the consumer with a highly engaging ad unit that where AI has been used in many forms to build that ad unit in real time. So we don't process personal data at all. And if there's any personal data being used, it's the data that belongs to the client, and therefore they are responsible for the gathering and storage and security of that data. Because bear in mind that a lot of the activity that we do is pushing a campaign into DSPs, which is the trading platforms for digital media.
Now, of course, like the data is the client responsibility, but just out of curiosity, are you hearing from your clients that they are now having difficulties in getting data because everything that happened from the cookie side? I know that you don't do it yourself, but your clients have to rely on that. And plus,
Yes.
like many tech giants, like for example, Apple started to implement like more, I would say, aggressive policies to avoid having the data being handled to third parties. So, what are you seeing in this domain, Ian?
Obviously, the cookies are disappearing, so cookies will no longer be available to marketers and to advertisers. That's a process that's been going on for some time. And Apple's limitations or restrictions around cookies in Safari is a big event. Google are taking and obviously a huge amount of digital traffic is through Google systems along with Facebook. Google have said that the removal of cookies will happen sometime during the summer of 2024, and they've made a number of moves in that direction. And that means that advertisers that are making heavy users of any technology are seeing the cookie disappear as a mechanism to track effectiveness. Now, that then means that they've got to find different methods to track effectiveness of their advertising. Advertising spend for any brand is a huge investment. It's a huge part of the balance sheet. And therefore, to optimize that, you need methods for tracking, which means you've got to communicate directly with the consumer and have their explicit permission to collect, store, and utilize their data for ongoing marketing, and to use that data to create what we call an ID, which identifies an individual across devices and says, Mehmet's on his connected TV, he's on what looks like a mobile device and a browser. Therefore, we think it's the same person. We attach an ID to that individual, but we need your explicit permission to communicate with you, to send you outbound messages, and to use your data and any data where you belong to the same segment, so individuals that have a similar profile to you. We have to have your permission. And that's the challenge that's facing advertisers right now, is that trade-off between optimizing spend and protecting the privacy and security of the consumer.
Now, this is also, but at the end of the day, still with the consent, let's say, of the consumer, data should be handled. So, in your opinion, who should control the consumer data, and how you see this changing with all what's happening currently?
Yeah, I mean, the issue of control is a complex one. I mean, primarily the relationship is between the consumer and a brand. So the brand has responsibility to protect their data, and obviously we're all familiar with various data breaches that have occurred in recent years. So there are a lot of technical challenges with making sure that personal data is secure for a start. So I think brands have the first responsibility for managing data in a personal data in a responsible way. But then you cannot ignore the huge where a huge proportion of their revenue is coming through advertising and the use of data. So what we call the walled gardens, the likes of Facebook, Google data passing through their systems. And I think the tech companies probably should do more to protect privacy. Um, in many cases, the big tech companies have been brought to the table by regulators in the EU and in the US. The EU, for example, the European Union has been very strict on data protection and privacy
Right.
legislation. That's only going to increase as AI starts to take hold in advertising, which it is already, no question. And that creates
Mhm.
even bigger challenges about security and privacy.
Mhm. Like you mentioned, I a couple of like let's call them trends, right? So that are happening in this space, mainly AI,
Mm,
right? So what other
mm,
trends are you seeing happening? Because you know, from what I'm hearing, and a couple of um, discussions with friends offline on this topic, so they are saying like the ad tech industry is on the verge of a major transformation. Now, when
mm.
I try to understand more, I hear mixed opinions. So
Mm.
I'm curious, as
So,
I was explaining to you.
um,
So, what are the
what
trends
kind of
that we might see?
what kind of transformation are you hearing? Just just out of interest.
Yeah, and like some people go to very extremist and say like maybe the whole way we do advertisement as we do it today on the internet might change, and this would go to
Hmm.
something completely different. Like we're gonna go
Yeah.
all way with something like metaverse, VR, these kinds of things. And sometimes
Hmm.
you hear people they say,
Hmm.
no, like this is something here to stay. Although, like with all the changes and regulations that comes in, still big brands would have, the power to navigate, let's say, the regulations. So I'm hearing,
Yeah.
opinions from two different, I would say, sides, and each one is like interesting discussions, I would say. So, but from someone like you, Ryan, like who's inside this, I would say I would I would hear something more accurate.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think we have to accept that AI is going to transform advertising and ad tech for sure, and it already is on the generative front. But we can come back to AI. Um, Elsewhere, there's no doubt that Web3, as an always-on, high-speed, very interactive, highly personalized technology, will change advertising. I think the metaverse, so augmented reality, and and techniques like that will steadily increase in sophistication and in relevance to the consumer. But there are some major barriers, such as the cost of devices and headsets, and whether we really want to spend lengthy periods of time with a headset. I have my doubts about that. Um, I think for certain segments, for certain parts of the population, so gamers, for example, are very used to in-game advertising and in-app advertising. Um, I think what all of those trends mean is a massive opportunity for advertisers, both an opportunity and a challenge, to decide where do they invest. Do they do this in-house or do they invest with technology partners? And if they choose to invest with technology partners, are they losing the insight that is actually necessary to grow their brand and to build lasting relationships or not? I think for what you would class as the traditional ad tech providers, the likes of Google, again, facing major challenges. You can see that Meta have chosen to, entirely rebrand as Meta and to put billions into the metaverse as a chosen strategy. But we're yet
Mhm.
to really see um, a significant payback from Meta's metaverse investment. Google, with their investment in things like DeepMind, is choosing to add AI to its ad tech platforms, and the likes of YouTube, for example.
Mhm.
Um, so they are taking a somewhat different approach. And then you've got other more recent entrants in the large scale technology companies like Amazon, who have their own DSP, and obviously have a lot of data about your shopping habits. And as long as it is back to the earlier point about privacy, if Amazon are able to leverage the data asset that they have, they are in a very powerful position. Because in the end, the purpose of advertising is that you buy more. And obviously,
Right.
Amazon knows an awful lot about what you buy and when. and your views and your feedback and so on. So they're in an interesting position if they can leverage it, and they have their cloud computing, AWS expertise as well. So they have the horsepower and they have the data. The question is how their strategy develops in the ad tech field.
Mm-hmm. Are we going to see any consolidation in the ad tech space, Ian?
Yeah, absolutely. Lots. I think a lot of the small to medium-sized companies will struggle to survive because of the investment that's required to maintain a viable solution in the face of huge competition that have very deep pockets. Apple, Amazon, Facebook, Google. These are hugely cash-rich businesses that can afford to invest, and they do huge percentages of their income into R&D. And they can afford to invest in areas that do develop and invest in areas in some cases where they don't develop, and they can afford to take that risk. So the smaller to medium-sized companies are going to struggle to find the investment, and they're going to have to find niches in the ad tech space, whether it's content or relationship management or automated design or whatever it might be. They're going to have to find the niches where they can compete.
Mm-hmm. Now, coming back to the AI point, and by the time we broadcast this to the air, it will be maybe 2 weeks time from now. But just today, this morning, I've seen the news from OpenAI that they're gonna start to speak and being able to take images and you chat with it based on the image. The reason I'm asking you this, from ad perspective, like, do you think now any company that is in AI space has the capability to become an ad tech company?
Yes, up to a point. The beauty of ChatGPT, particularly GPT-4, is the sheer amount of data that the models have been trained on, and that's why they're called large language models. For most tech companies, there's not a great deal of point in trying to replicate the scale of data that these things have been trained on. In OpenAI's case, it's a little bit different for images. They're still training their models for image detection and production. And you could say that voice is actually relatively easy. Once you've solved for text, it's actually relatively easy to put voice on top of a platform like that. Now that means, as a technology asset, hugely powerful to any business that's looking to develop what you could call ad tech capabilities. So we use ChatGPT's APIs for text, and we customize their APIs for specifically for the briefing part of our technology, because there's no point in us replicating the text mining capability that something like ChatGPT has. And the same thing for DALL-E 3 on for images. But the interesting thing is that there's now there's 100 applications out there that will generate an image, what we call, or text, and you can generate a film or a photo or a piece of text. So that's the generative AI phenomenon that we've seen over the last year or so. That's going to continue. Absolutely no question about that. But my view as a technologist is that is not particularly clever. You can randomly generate a set of images as long as you've trained your model adequately on historic data. What's really meaningful is which image do you actually need for the application that you want to put it to? And how do you decide which image is most relevant? And that means understanding the data that's connected to a combination of images. That's far more interesting. It's far more challenging, and it's definitely the way the ad tech industry will progress.
So the question I was asking you, Ian, is when you talked about using AI for generating add text, images, and even we saw video. Now, some experts says that like how much creative can AI be here? Because actually we are using an already generated data and we're just given to an algorithm to repurpose it in a different way. Isn't it true? Like AI will, because some people it's a very famous saying now. If you turn it with garbage, it will give you garbage. But I don't think we give it only garbage, and I think we gave some really creative things. But how far do you think AI can be really creative when it generates, like, let's say, full blown a marketing campaign, including scripts, image selection, and video?
I mean, the answer to that question is there's no question that AI can be used to deliver the entire campaign cycle and all its associated content across all channels, as long as the channels are connected, and the return path data goes back to the underlying algorithm. What's needed is technical integration of different media channels for a start, which means all the data that a set of models might see are integrated at some point, and that those models include machine learning in some form, or techniques like what we call reinforcement learning. That means we're effectively rewarding a model for its ability to achieve a certain result. And we use neural nets for the same purpose. And it's actually the same technique that Tesla is using for driverless cars, for their FSD version 12, is a neural network that's learning about the data that it's receiving in real time, processing that in real time to enable a car to make decisions. And really what we're talking about here is very much the same technique, but being applied for a completely different application. So no doubt in my mind that over time we will see the script, the content, variations of that content being generated in real time with increasing levels of relevance to the consumer, and machine learning effectively taking over large parts of the production cycle for advertising. Where there are some limitations is you do see instances where creative agencies invent a crazy idea for a campaign that somehow resonates with an audience. And that's probably the most interesting area. At what point do computer vision algorithms learn really, really innovative concepts, let's call them that, for campaigns that where it's not been exposed to that kind of data in the past? That's the tipping point that we're not really seeing yet, but it will come. And it's neural networks that will really drive that.
How long do you think it would take us until we reach this? Like, or let me, if I want to rephrase the question, like how this space would look like in after, let's say, I don't want to say 5 years because when you say 5 years, it's too long. Let's say in 3 years or 2 years time.
Yeah. I think in 2 to 3 years, we'll certainly see a number of campaigns that have been entirely automated and have been proven to be faster and more relevant to a given audience. We will certainly see that. And I mean every single aspect of the campaign end to end, including just multimedia delivery across media channels.
Like you mentioned something about, cloud and spendings, and maybe it's, as a CTO as well, you might give us some insights. So where are you seeing, the technology spendings heading, in the near and long future?
I mean, most organizations, including ours, are not processing data on-premise any longer. It's cloud-based. There are organizations that run on-premise, the highly regulated industries, for example, may run on-premise databases and cloud-based infrastructure. We are entirely cloud-based ourselves. We use AWS. We're not multi-cloud. There are some organizations that are multi-cloud. There are some ad tech providers that have to be multi-cloud because there are some brands that will say, well, we don't want our data going through Amazon because we're a retailer. So we don't want to see our data going through AWS, or we don't want to see our data going through Google's platform. So therefore, you do see ad tech companies that are multi-cloud. So they'll have Azure, AWS, and Google Cloud. So that's increasing.
Yeah.
But it's one of the reasons that's one of the things that's fueled AI in the last year or two is the compute horsepower has increased exponentially, and the cost of that horsepower has dropped significantly. And that means the amount of data that we can process cost effectively has increased significantly. And that's an absolutely crucial aspect of the growth in AI is compute horsepower and the cost of that processing.
And, out of curiosity, how much is important, especially for ad tech companies, to invest in solutions like data analytics and, these kinds of solution and data mining maybe also?
Oh, it's essential. And it's in technology these days, the best career path is data science. So data engineering, data science, machine learning ops are huge growth areas in terms of career development. So, brands have to invest in data science as a discipline. Ad tech companies obviously rely on data science as a discipline, so they have to invest in those skills. I think the interesting question for brands is how much of that expertise do they add in-house, or how much do they rely on partners? And I think for the large agencies out there, they're at a real tipping point. AI is going to continue to cause them some strategic pain, let's call it that, where they've not really, the large agency networks have not really invested in data science as a discipline. And the knock-on effect of that is that they've not been developing the repositories of data that they can then apply to AI going forward. They've been somewhat left behind.
Yeah. As we are coming to the end, just now, I target CTOs and I target also, to be founders or new founders, let's say. From your experience, I am like, you've been in this for a long time. What advice you can give for someone first who's interested in your niche, which is the ad tech? What are the things that they should care about when they are building their startups? And second, general advice for any technical founder who's just starting his venture or just starting his career.
Yeah, I mean, for startups, if you mean a startup that's going to have some kind of technology product, then they've got to be very clear about the niche that they're trying to address, and not assume that they can cope with huge technology companies that have much bigger budgets. And then they need to be very clear about what their go-to-market strategy is. How are they going to reach the audience for their chosen product? And most technology startups completely fail at this. They misunderstand the niche, and then they don't adequately understand how to take their product to market in a very efficient way. In terms of individuals starting out, then if it's the technology career path, then absolutely learn things like go open source, learn things like TensorFlow and Python, things like PyTorch. But also things like prompt engineering is going to be a major area of growth in the technology space over the next year or two. How do you configure prompt-based systems to provide intelligent answers to very complex questions? So we call that prompt engineering. It's a big growth area. But make sure that you've got a solid grounding in maths and statistics. Some of these are the underlying equations in AI. Some of them are quite complex. So an underlining grounding in maths or statistics is a good thing. But it's open source. Python and Spark are the leading tools that they should really acquire if they want a technical career path. And I would also say to the marketing professionals, I've got to learn much more about the technology, the data, the strengths and weaknesses of various technologies. They've got to have a far better understanding of these things if they are a non-technical decision maker in a brand or an advertising agency.
Yeah, actually, yeah, please go ahead.
No, I was just going to say they have a lot to learn, in my view.
Yeah. So, like one thing, maybe we repeated it on the show too much also as well, to your point. Like every company now needs to be a data-driven company. And, this applies not only for, let's say, the IT or the technical folks, it applies to every department in the organization. So they can, take better decisions. They can, understand what's happening. They can understand their customers. I'm not sure, like, did I miss to ask you anything? Like, this is, it's not a tricky question, but really, is there anything that you wish that I had asked you?
That's actually quite a good question. It's a nice open question. I don't think so. No, you've asked a very broad range of questions. No, I can't think of anything that you haven't asked me that I thought you might.
Okay.
You're obviously good at it.
I'll turn, one guest saw that I'm doing a trick. And the guy said, no, I'm not doing a trick, really, because sometimes, I do the show daily. So, of course, I take my notes. I have the question that I prepared. But we are human beings and maybe I have missed something down the road. So just to make sure that maybe an idea that you wanted to highlight, for the guests, so they can have this window, let's say, to share this. But anyway, thank you very much, Ian. I really enjoyed this. I learned a lot about AdTech today from you and, some of the things that we are expecting to see in the future. So thank you very much for enlightening us around this. And
it's been a great pleasure.
Same here. And of course, like, it's always good. Yeah. So it's good. Yeah. So thank you very much for tuning in. And thank you, Ian, again for joining me today. And as usual, this is how I end up my episode. Please, if you have any questions, any feedback, don't hesitate to reach out to me. And thank you very much for tuning in. We'll meet you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
It's been a great pleasure. Thank you.
Hit that subscribe button, share the show with your tech-savvy friends and fellow entrepreneurs, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. Your support means the world to us.